So Carol told you how we get by through the NIH, and I will tell you how you get funded. So you blame her for one thing, and you blame me for the other one, okay? The one thing that I was thinking about some of her comments is that, that the study sections are in the public domain. So you can go also and at least see who are the members of each study section according to the institute. So you can, just to have an idea, who are the reviewers. So there is a group of permanent members that always sit there for a period of time. So you can check around and see the area of expertise. All right. So the issue of the K08 or K23 grants. So these are career development award for you to become an expert in the field, basically. That's the bottom line. So the NIH give money to a group of individuals like you that just finishing fellowship or junior faculty that they would like to have further training in any area of medicine. So it can range from basic science to health service research to translational medicine. It doesn't matter. Each of the institute have a study section that is related to career development. So you need to, and it's important that there is a commitment from your institution and the people when you work that you need to have this 75% time commitment to your research career. And in general, these are 3 to 5 years award. Now, there are a number of things that we will going over each of the different aspects of the grant. That it's obviously it's always electronic submission, and we are going to go over each of the different components of the grant. So the grant has different sections, and it's important to remember that each section is evaluated different. So you get score for your science, and you get score for your career, your educational component, your development component. And this is very important because it's 50-50. So sometimes you can have a great science, but if your educational component is sloppy, you lose. So it's very important, and many of you pay a lot of attention to the science and very little attention to the career development. I'll come back to that in a little bit. And this is not something that you do the night before or 2-3 days before. Because I'm telling you, we've seen many of those applications in which people do this at the end. And that's when you lose. And like any other grant, they have the different component of the research strategy. And as Carol mentioned, these new sections, scientific premise, scientific rigor, biological variable. I just came back from the study section, as I mentioned, and it's not that you get a different score if you don't include it, but if you don't include it, then it goes into your weakness. And so one way or the other, you have to put them in. Because there is always at the end, there is scientific premise included. If it's not, then it goes into your weakness. So you don't want to have a weakness because you didn't include it. So you have to do it. So we will go over each of these letter of recommendation. It's important that these letters, you don't send them with the application. They go directly from each of the individuals that you ask them to the NIH. So you need to be sure that this letter of recommendation that talk about you go there on time, and that this person does it, okay, because they are beyond your control. All right, so let's start first with the mentor. So this career award basically are given to you with the idea that you have an important and interesting project that is worthwhile funded, but it's basically very important who is your mentor. And the mentor should be a recognized and accomplished investigator in that area of research, number one. Number two, he or she has to be funded today, not 5 years ago. So you can go a lot of professors for whatever reason in life, they are not funded today as they were 5 years or 10 years ago. That individual is not the right mentor for you. So you need to pick a mentor that today he or she is funded. because that means that that individual is still active, a leader in the field, accomplished investigator, etc., etc. And he or she has to have independent support in order also to help you support your own research, because there is not much money in the career development world for your grant. And you obviously can have more than one mentor. And this is something that is important to think about, because maybe one mentor can provide you this specific area of support, and the other one more on imaging, for example. And then the two of them, they complement very nicely for your specific project. And so this is something that you need to discuss with your mentor, and whether you need a team of people, to co-primary mentors, it doesn't matter. The point is, mentorship is very important. So you need to think about it, about what's the best strategy, how do you put them together, how you work with them. Sometimes maybe you need a mentor from another institution because they have some specific expertise that your institution doesn't have it. Now UCLA is big. Yes, you ask a question?
Yes, if they look for diversity of mentors, so let's say you were funded on a different award with one mentor and you wanted to apply.
I'm sorry, I don't hear you.
You want to continue working with that mentor.
My question was more about the mentor. If you were working with a mentor on another award and then applying for a career award with the same mentor,
Well, that's fine.
is it fine as
Yeah.
opposed to finding a different mentor?
Yeah, if this individual is productive with you, is helping you, and will help you, in your new proposal, yes, that's no problem. On the contrary, it's even better, because if you already publish a paper with him or her, that shows that you already a track record of working with this individual. No, it's fine. That's no problem. Yeah. But the important thing is, who is the mentor? Because I can tell you that many of you have problems with mentor, and this is an issue not only in the institution, in many places. So this person has to have experience, this person needs to be available, he or she needs to be interested in working with you, and they need to have a track record with previous mentees. Some people are outstanding scientists, they work very well, but when you go back and check the history of previous mentees, there are conflicts. So if you know that, well, you need to be careful. So this is maybe with you will not happen, that conflict. That's possible. But be sure that you know, and it's very simple. You do a PubMed, you check who are those individuals, how many papers junior faculty have, etc., etc. So a lot of things about the mentors and mentees is in the public domain. And obviously you can talk with the people. And again, that this person has to be funded. NIH funded. That's no industry, this can have all these different things. But if this person doesn't have a track record with NIH, it's not an appropriate, and today, active funding. And as I said before, you can have more than one mentor. So the issue of the mentor is very important, because this individual needs to work with you when you develop the grant. I just got a grant to review a few weeks ago, internal. You can see that was very obvious that the mentor never worked with the individual, because I knew the PI, the mentor. I know that he is an outstanding investigator. I read the application. I said, there is a disconnect. This individual never read. Why he didn't read it, I don't know. But that's what you need to. If he or she is not committed in working with you in the development of the grant, forget about it. So I would like to emphasize this, because I've been doing this for a number of years, and sometimes I can see the number of people that have conflicts. So you need to be very upfront once you decide who is your mentor, because it's kind of a life relationship for a while, like a couple or whatever, that you go together. And so if this individual is not involved with you, then their enthusiasm is not there. And so that is an important thing that you need to take into consideration. Yes?
How does it look if you have if you choose a mentor that you don't really have a track record with, so maybe you're switching fields or your interests have shifted, so you may have a great track record with one mentor for many years, but now you're switching to a slightly different field. But so I submit my case, but I'm not going to have a track record with this new mentor.
Yeah, well, I think that is, I don't see that as a problem. As long as the science that you are proposing in your case is complementary to the science of this individual, that's fine. And I think the issue is the matching. And so where is this individual, how he or she complement with what you are proposing to work with you. Okay? Yes?
Based on your experience reviewing these things, what would you say is the average number of mentors that people put on grants? And out of those mentors, I know you've got to have at least one person who's got solid NIH funding, but let's say people have 3 or 4 different mentors.
Yeah.
Is it reasonable to propose like one mentor that has NIH funding and then the others that don't, as long as you can justify it?
Well, it's obviously one, you have to have funding. Sometimes a complementary, maybe there is a kind of maybe more, not your primary, one primary mentor and the other maybe will be consultants in the group. You can define the role of the other individual, because if those individuals, for example, they are bringing some specific expertise, technical and whatever, but that's part of the team that you put together with your mentor here, and these people are kind of more consultant because they bring this to the table. There is no magic number. You cannot put 10, but I think 2 or 3. You develop a team. What's that? Mitch, you have other comments about that.
I think the mentors should match the education plan, and most people's education plan have at least 2 or 3 major things that you're going to be learning. So for your mentors are going to teach you those things, and they should be the best people in the institution to teach you those things. I think if those mentors have NIH funding, that's better, but they're not always possible. I think there are some individuals who aren't going to have NIH, like a statistician who's going to teach you a particular technique, obviously are less likely to have their own independent NIH funding.
Yeah.
So, but more is better. So if you can find those people, that would be ideal.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, because there are some people that are co-investigators in many grants, and then without having but these people are very important, so that not be a problem. Yeah, somebody has another question? Okay. So let's start with the issue of the environment. Is not a big deal. You work at the big institutions, so you go to the CTSI, and we can give you a lot of description of how big is UCLA, all the different resources, and you can tailor them according to the area, if it is in the neuroscience, in the cardiovascular area, in health service research. So this it can be modified, and there are different templates that you can get through the CTSI. I'm not doing anything. It's magic. Yeah. It came up. All right. So here is very important when you start describing who you are, the candidate background. So there it is important that you describe your commitment to an academic career and why you want to do it, what you have done in the past, even from medical school, residence, fellowship, how you initiate this area of research. So you can tell something about that and describe your previous training and how this related with your long-term objective, what you would like to do. So this is important that you tell that story, because you have 6 pages, and I come back to this in a little bit, where it's part of what you need to tell why it's important that they give you this award. So sometimes an area of research, you wrote a paper, you connect with this mentor, or whatever, you're a subspecialty, you like this disease. So you need to tell a story, and that varies from each of you. So you describe your research effort to this point, and how this research effort can help you to be an independent investigator, because the mentor already is working on this area. So in your thinking, you need to see how you will be separate from your mentor 5 years from now. For example, you start working, I work with people in my own area of expertise, and I'm a nephrologist, I work on bone and these areas, and then I have one of my colleagues that got the K08, but it's already, we plan how he will be different than what I do. So at one time or the other, you can think about if the hypotheses are correct, then 5 years from now, I will take this line of work. And so that is important to provide some idea how this, you don't have to provide too many details, but how you can see your line of work that at one time or the other will be different than your mentor. And that's important to, and it's also important this issue of the time commitment, the 75 protected time that is being signed by your chair, division chief, etc. So in your career goals, you need to describe very clearly a logical progression from the prior research, what you are going to get, and what type of experience you will obtain in order to become an independent investigator. Maybe I repeat some of these things because it's very important that you utilize this research and this educational component, how the two will go together to fulfill what you would like to do. Okay? So this is kind of more or less the same thing, where it's important to develop the teaching, the educational component that you will go through, and obviously will change according if you are in health service research, in basic science, in clinical research, etc., etc. So all the curriculum that you will have to do differ, and that's why you have to tailor that according where you are coming from and what are you planning to do. And so you need to demonstrate, this is very important, the type of courses that you will take in order to obtain the appropriate training. So this is, you need to understand the formal coursework that you will do, meetings and seminars, mentorship plan, scientific papers. So these are the kind of things that you need to come up when you develop this career development. So this is an example. For example, somebody who just a few months ago got the K08. And so I thought it would be good to, so this individual did a master in science, in clinical research, and then he ordered all these classes that you need to be very specific. Molecular biology 244, this class, the other. You need to put, the point that I want to make here is that you make details of what are you going to do during this period of time. And so this is an important thing that sometimes you leave it at the last minute, and that's when you get dinged about it. So also there's a section about, specific section that they ask you conduct of research. So you need to tell them what classes you will take for the responsible of conduct of research, ethics, etc. So just be specific. You have to include this information. So there are many of them. You can do it through the CTSI, you look about through UCLA, etc. It's health service research. Obviously, this depends in which area of medicine you are. Okay, so let's go to the grant now. So the grant, as I mentioned to you before, the whole thing is 12 pages. And the specific aim is 1 page. So it's important that you see that in these 12 pages, you have your background and career and an objective. And you have also the research strategy. So the whole combined thing is 12 pages. So you can see it's almost 6 pages and 6 pages between the career development, your goals and training and your plan. Yes?
And it also be 7 and...
I'm sorry?
And it also be 7
and 5? Yeah, you can do this kind of thing. Yes, it doesn't have to be, but I'm saying it's almost a 50-50. And the reason why I emphasize that, because each section is scored different. So when the reviewers, you go to a special studies section where they review case and training grant, basically. And so those individuals are instructed to look at your career and your science. So that's the way that you get scored. And I will know that next June, for example, I will be for the first time, I've never been on that study section. So in next June, I will be in an NIDDK study section for trainings and K Award. So I will learn a little bit more, but I know that that's what they emphasize. And it's important, this whole issue of statement from your mentors, contributors, and that you have to do. All right, so let's move on to the. So the grant is very similar to when we put R01, and you remember you have these 12 pages which include your career development. It's not something that goes separate. Sometimes many people get confused about it, and it has to be included within these 12 pages. And as Carol told you, the pages are very important because if you go over, the grant will not go through the cycle. And sometimes even the system doesn't allow you to plug in when you put it electronically. So you have to come up with the different things. One thing is the page 1 is the aims. What do you intend to do? And I will come back to this in a little bit. And then the 12 pages, I say that including the Career Development Award, the plan that you want to do, and then you have the significance. And the significance reflects what is being done in the field and why your proposal is important. And then the innovation, the approach, and then the issue of scientific premise. We are going to go to each of them. So let's go first to the aims. Is 1 page. So in 1 page, the reviewer have an idea how excited is your project or how boring is your project. So you sell, writing grant is like selling. So people need to be excited about what you are selling. And so it has to be well written. And it's very nice when you go to the study section and the people say, this is a great grant. Even by established investigators, or sometimes by the established investigators say, this is terrible. So already when people read your grant and you have something is nice to read, they get excited about it. And they will fight for your grant. So the grant you write, and write. So this 1 page is very exciting. So the first thing, you can introduce your topic. What are you going to study? But obviously in this first introduction, you need to focus on your project. Cardiovascular disease in this area, of diabetes, blah, blah, blah. But what are you going to study? So immediately you need to link and state concisely the goals and summarize the outcome of what you would like to study, the implications to the field. And so it's very important that you link each of these 3 statements until you get your hypothesis. So they have to be very well focused, right, and hone what you want to, the message that you want to see. And this is something that you write it 50 times until you got the right version of the aims. So you read it, you write it, and it's also that's something that you work with your mentor. And after a while, when you think it's kind of more, advanced version, is when you give it to somebody outside you and your mentor, whether this individual also can give you some further feedback. The one thing I want you to start writing these things is that your ego needs to set aside, because people will tell you this is not good. So if you get upset about it, let's forget about it. Because if I go and say, oh, it's nice, because you will get upset if I tell you it's bad, let's forget about it. All of us, we have ego, we are sensitive, but you need to be open to the critiques. And if they tell you it's not ready to go, it's not ready to go. Because all of us, we want you to get funded. And so you want to develop the best you can develop. So the research strategy is 1 or 2 pages. So you have the significance. That's the first section. And this is 1, 2 pages, 1.5 pages. Nothing is. It could be even less sometimes. But it's important to explain the critical problem that you would like to study. What is known in the field, what is the barriers, what is unknown, and how what you are proposing really will enhance the field. Clinical practice, pathophysiology, and that's how you link this information to what you would like to do. Maybe you want to just introduce new method, new methodology, new technology, new concepts. So you need to link this to the area that you want to do. Again, this is a selling important selling information that you do. So I think this is a nice way of defining the significance by the background of your proposal. You critically evaluate current knowledge, supporting information, conflicting, and how your own data fill that gap. It's not knowing about this, it's knowing about this, there is a conflict, and then you have to do it. And so you identify this gap and how your proposal will link that gap, and how this will be linked to your aims and hypotheses. And sometimes, after you can finish about the link to broader implication of your findings. For example, if your hypothesis is supported, this will change in the long term the way that we practice or treat or whatever you are planning to do, or understand a process. Now, this is not a review of the literature. That's very important, okay? And so you need to provide a perspective and develop concept about what are you planning to do. And you need to understand that the individual who will read your grant, maybe for case, well, not all of them are experts, but it's important that you are very knowledgeable and diplomatic and precise, because your data maybe are in conflict with Joe Blow's data. It's fine, but if you didn't put it in that reference, maybe Joe Blow is your reviewer. So all these kind of things are very important. You need to be upfront. When you put the literature, you put the main key papers on that thing, the main key papers that are in supporting your data, as well as those who are maybe not supporting your data, and why. And you need to be very diplomatic, because always think about it, that maybe that reviewer is sitting in there. As I say at the beginning, some of the members of the study sections we know already who they are. So if by any chance it's an expert in your field who is sitting in the study section, you better be careful. So this whole thing is very important, how you set up the stage for the significance. And it's important also that you need to make the reviewer's task easy, because you are late. You are coming so late. Well, the traffic is impossible. We're not going to invite you again. This is not good. And so it's important that you make the reviewer's life easy when he or she is reading your thing. You need to repeat the statement, because something that you say in page 1, now we are in page 7, and maybe I forgot the acronym that you wrote at the beginning, and you think is obvious. Well, we forget, and then you have to go back. Whatever you do, that makes the reviewer angry. So be very careful when you use a lot of acronyms, how you set them up along the application. And also you need to carry this sequence through the innovation and the approach. And consider very important where you put your tables and figures, because maybe an important figure in the significant, maybe it's very important because it really brings together concept, data, and hypothesis. So you need to figure out where do you place them also. So these are issues that obviously your mentor will help you, the strategizing where you do these things. But it's something that every grant goes to the same cycle, the same kind of issue that all of us have to put together. Now, Carol mentioned this issue of the scientific premise that you want. So when you look at the NIH, they say, describe the scientific premise for the proposal, the project, including consideration of the strengths and weakness of published research or preliminary data. That's what is written in the instructions. Well, recently I just wrote a grant And then what we put is the rationale of our proposal is strongly supported by the published human and animal studies and by our own preliminary, blah, blah, blah. So it doesn't have to be a long, it can be just a few paragraphs. It doesn't have to be nothing to do with innovation. It's just a specific statement about how your premise is defined by the data in the literature or this or that, just to put some step. And as I said before, they ask all the time to the reviewer, is the scientific premise included? So if you don't put it in, then you get negative point, okay? So innovation. So this is an area in which you need to identify key areas that are missing and why your study will fulfill that gap. So you need to really think about how you make this interesting and you sell the product. Provide new information from either your own data or the data from others, and how this, offer new perspectives. So there you can think about your hypothesis, how this would lead to a new innovation on what you are planning to do. So together, this between the aim, the significant, and the innovation really should provide a kind of integrated approach at what are you planning to study. Okay? It seems difficult, but it's kind of the same story because they are very well separate, and each of these sections have a different role in the application. And again, this is a kind of writing that you develop with your mentor. Your mentor needs to be heavily involved, and obviously they will give you a grant that they have written. So, there are a lot of material around that you can use just as examples for you to be inspired. So the approach is also the last, these 5 to 7 pages is for R01, but as I mentioned before, you have for everything 6, 7 pages, not 12, like for R01. But it's basically what you would like to do in the course of these 5 years, the type of methodology and what type of study you are planning to do. And it's also in the approach you have to include, if you have, it's not obliged, for K you're not obliged, but in the approach, if you have some preliminary data, it's important to use it. Sometimes your mentor can help you, and it's nothing wrong if you use some of his preliminary data or his work and some of the stuff that you do. That is something that you discuss with your mentor. But it's very important that there is when you describe the work that needs to be done and how you will address each of the specific aims. And so this is very important that you spend a little time. And there are many ways of organizing the approach according to what type of work are you doing. If it is a clinical trial, it's a basic science things, if it is kind of more health service oriented. So there are many ways of developing this approach. According to, sometimes you can describe initially the general overview, the clinical trial, the study design, the type of lab test that you will do, the statistical analysis, the justification. Or if you do more experiment, you need to go more specific to the experiment according to the different aims that you will do. So, for example, you can have a section on general methods, a clinical project, what instrument you use, what study population, recruitment, follow-up, because this will be across the study that you will propose. If it is a laboratory study, you can do cell tissue, cells, tissue cultures, mice, whatever. So you need to think about how you set it up. And so these are issues that will be overall for the project, and then you don't have to repeat it at each of the when you will address each of the different aims. And it's important when you use these methods, whatever method you will assess, is the precision accuracy. It could be the precision of a test, the blood test, an instrument, whatever you will measure, you need to show what is the precision and accuracy of that test, because that will be your primary outcome, whatever you are going to study. And this is important, whether you have previous experience with that element that you will use. And that obviously happens when you work with your mentor, and according to what area of medicine you are working on it. But that's something that is kind of pretty straightforward. Cardiovascular disease, imaging, echo, whatever, you know what I mean? So this kind of thing is pretty straightforward. So what they want to know, how you will do the experiment. You need to provide a lot of details, how they are done, what kind of data you will be obtaining, how the data will be analyzed, what type of results you expect. Sometimes the results will be consistent with your hypothesis, but also you need to have some alternative hypothesis, because maybe the results go in the opposite direction. So you need to have a section that we call analysis and interpretation, in which if everything goes in one direction, it will be bad. Maybe the process can go this, so you have to have alternative explanation to what you are proposing. So one way of doing these experimental studies is to address to test a specific aim number 1. So now you are on page 7 of the grant, and the specific aim, you wrote it on page 1. So we forget what was the title of the aim. So obviously when you go to a specific aim 1, you put that title again. So you facilitate the reviewer that doesn't have to go back to page 1 to remember specifically what you wrote at the end. And be sure that the specific aim 1 in page 1, it reads exactly the same in page 7, because sometimes you change little words, and some people are more picky than others. So be very careful that you think about it. So when you do a specific aim 1, maybe you have experiment 1, experiment 2, and again, for the other aim 2, you do 2, 3, and 4. So when you go specifically to the aim 1, you need to address each experiment, the procedure, what are you planning to do, and you have to have, again, a section for analysis and interpretation. Okay? So, and the key issue here, what they will ask you is, can this person do the work, what you are planning to do? Do you have the proven method to do it, the technical expertise, the resources, study population, for example? And that is what is so important with whom you are working, because they will not expect you to have all this information. So that's what depends with laboratory you're coming from. If your mentor is a clinician, scientist with patients and studies this disease, yes, he has access to this patient population. These kind of things are extremely important. Really, this is based on your mentor. And that's what I see is so important with whom are you working. You know, his or her experience, background, publications, and your collaborators. Again, all the thing is you put everything together. Because if suddenly you want to do this technique and somebody at USC has that machine to do that stuff, well, it's important that that individual from USC, why he is involved in your project. That can be somebody, you know, in New York. It doesn't matter where. These days it's not a big deal to say, I need this collaborator because it brings to the table this specific technique. But all these things, you know, when you put it together, you have to keep in mind. So when you take the aims and the research strategy, you know, that's what you propose, something which is consistent throughout the different sections of the application. And when you do, for example, for those of you who are more on the K23, is that you complement the patient-oriented activity for that protocol that you will do in humans with laboratory studies or imaging, whatever you are planning to do, to make it, you know, everything very, very cohesive. Okay? And it's important, again, when you write this relationship in your career development, this issue between you and your mentor. how you, at one time or the other, you don't have to be very clear, but very precise, but it's important you think about it. And again, if more than one mentor you have in the application, which are the respective areas of expertise, how will you share responsibility, who is doing what, how often you meet them, etc., etc. Now, the mentor also needs to write a letter. And again, I see many times that mentors are not involved in writing that letter, and it's done the day before. And that is set up for failure. Because in that letter, he or she need to describe your research qualification, his or her research qualification, how do we put them together, how he will monitor in your work, how available he will be, his resources. So this is a story that, again, it takes a little back and forth between the two of you about how you develop that story. And that is very important. Remember what I told you, that career development is equal to the research strategy. So if you don't do it correctly, you will lose point. That's very simple. So again, if you have commentors, again, all the kind of things you need to be stated, and it's important about how you will have evaluation with your mentor. Every quarter we are going to do this, we are going to look at that. So something that there is a committee that is looking at your work and how this will be assessed on a regular basis. This is something that you have to. But if you have consultants, again, you need to explain why these individuals are important. For those who are going to have clinical trials, you need to have this, what we call data safety monitoring plan. That, these are kind of more cut and paste, that there are a lot of examples that you can use. But the most important element are those who are already described. It's important, the issue, as I said before, about the letters. The day of submissions are very important, and they go directly to the NIH. If they get late, they're out. So it's not that it goes from you to it's the person who you're asking to send the letter that has to load it in the system, okay? So you need at least 3 letters that they are referenced to you on your behalf. Should be done by well-established scientists, and should address your qualifications, competence, and the potential for becoming independent investigator by each of them. These letters should be from individuals not directly involved in the application, but who are familiar with your educational background, training, and interests. Okay, it's very important that you pick who are these individuals who will write a letter for you. And this obviously is something that you discuss with your mentor, because maybe you don't know that individual, but it's somebody that your mentor can say, Dr. X can do it because they know him well, etc., etc. Again, if the letters do not arrive, the application is not reviewed. But the environment, that's pretty straightforward. There are many CTSI, The institutional commitment is delivered by your chair, division, mainly the chair, who really signed the letter that you will give you the 75 protective time. And that is important because sometimes you don't get that. If you don't get that protective time, do not put the application. All right, so this is, this is letter from the chair, from the CTSI, Dr. Dubine can write a letter. All the different people in the leadership of the institution can write a letter of support. So finally, now since December of 2015, the salary cap now is 100K, so that's not bad. And so it went up, it went to be 95,000, so they went up by 5,000. It used to be 75,000 a couple of 2-3 years ago, so it's moving up. And so I think I will stop here, and probably my time is up, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Wow, overwhelming. Yeah.
When you talk about the application, you talk about your mentor or mentors.
how many is too many mentors? If you're working on a multidisciplinary project and you're really relying on people with different content expertise or different scientific expertise in terms of methods, how many is too many?
Well, I don't know. Maybe there is something that you cannot put 10, 5. My feeling in that situation, it has to be one person or two that are kind of the leaders of your mentor, co-mentors, and the other one can act as consultant. You can put a large team, but I think it is important that one or two individuals are kind of the leaders of your mentorship career, and the other one could be, complementary as consultant. I don't. What do you think?
I would cap it at around 4.
Yeah, that's
most.
Yeah, not too many. And again, you need to put the specific role of each of them. Why these individuals are important for your project. Okay.